Well, what a month it's been. I've been well and truly out of my comfort zone this month as I've been recovering from a car accident. And I've had to slow right down, which doesn't sit very well with me. I like to be busy. I'm a doing person, as they say. So I've not been working at my usual pace. And so this idea of pausing and slowing down, of course, is essential to healing. We know that we don't heal when we're exerting a lot of energy. We have to stop and make ourselves be peaceful. So 10 days before the accident, my mother actually passed. So it's been a bit of a month, and I've found myself, as I've been slowing down and working at a slower pace, that I've been reminiscing a lot about her. And what came to my mind in this last week particularly was thinking about our trips to go and visit her. So I used to take 2 days to drive there. She lived in another state. And I was reminded of those trips and what we always used to do in those trips. So there was a stopover just past the midway point where we always stayed overnight. And it was this tiny little country town in the middle of nowhere. And why I liked it so much, I'm not quite sure. But we always stayed at the same hotel. And I loved the people there. They were really friendly and welcoming, and they had great home-cooked breakfasts, and then we'd walk up into the township, and there was this wonderful cafe which was all decked out in Art Deco style, and they made the best strong Italian coffee. You could smell it as you walked in, and that was part of the experience as well. And the waitress, I think she'd worked there for about 50 years. She'd come up, she wore a little black dress and the white apron. She had a pencil over her ear, and she'd say, "What'll you have, love?" And so that was always an important part of that trip. Of course, I was going to see Mum. If we didn't do that, it just wasn't as good a trip. And, you know, it's funny the things that we do. I grew up in Sydney, Australia, and every time I go there, I always have this one day trip I do. And I used to go to school near the Opera House. I saw it being built. I know what's in the foundation, so I always take a walk around the Opera House first. And then I'll walk around to the harbour where the ferries leave, and you can take hydrofoil, which is a fast ferry, but I always choose the slow ferry and go off to Manly Beach, which is where I used to go swimming with my friends when I was a teenager. And so as the ferry goes out, the Opera House is on the right-hand side, and up on the left-hand side is where I used to live. And I lived in this, it was a mansion that had been divided up into a whole lot of very grungy apartments. But I loved it because my window looked out over the harbour and I could see the Opera House, which is really beautiful at night. So I'm on the ferry experiencing all these memories and go out to the heads and get to Manly Beach and always go and buy fish and chips and eat it on the beach. So that's my Sydney day trip. And, you know, we've been told it's not the destination, it's the journey. And isn't that true? It's those little things that connect us with memories and, you know, really remind us of who we are. So there are times when we need to change speed, and that can be hard for some of us. You know, there is a sense of striving or looking over there, looking for the better, and sometimes we can choose just to be here in our presence, appreciate what we have. And, you know, these little important things like we do when we plan trips, these are good things. They ground us. They just keep us in this space of knowing who we really are. So the scripture that's been coming to me in the last few weeks is Psalm 23, and I really love that. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. And that's a beautiful one when you're feeling really exhausted. You just lie back on the bed and you feel like you're lying on green grass looking up at the sky. To find our good sometimes requires us to step away from the world. And there are quite a few simple things we can do that help us with that. We can start with breakfast. And I know many of you like to scroll on your phone. Even I am tempted to do that. But instead of doing that, and instead of burning the toast, you might just want to eat your breakfast and savor the food. Instead of rushing out into the traffic, you might want to drive a little mindfully. And instead of scrolling through social media, and I often say, I'm just going to check my TikTok account. I'll just be a few minutes, and then I look at the clock an hour later and I'm still looking at all this stuff. So I do have a rule though, when I go for a walk, I never take my phone. So, there's the good and the bad there. Instead of rushing into the grocery store and just quickly grabbing a few things, and don't we often forget what we actually went there for? We could spend time choosing healthy food that's going to nurture us. Instead of rushing to meditation class, I always find this one funny, rushing to meditation. Really, meditation class starts before the class. It's not something we should be squeezing into the busy timetable. And so we don't want to multitask. It's good to focus on one thing and do it really well. And so it is the same if you find that you've been in an accident. You just have to step back away from the normal routine. So these are all practical things we can do, and that's part of being here and not there. So I know that some people have been a little disturbed about what's going on in the country. I had a friend say, well, I'm going to go and live in another country. And it's true, we can change our environment, we can change countries. I know, I've done it, and there's good reasons for doing it. So we can change our physical environment, and that's why we love holidays, isn't it? Get out of your space, you can step back and have a little more perspective on things. So we can change the physical environment, but we can also change our attitude. And you might say, well, I would like to buy a new house, and I wonder if you change your attitude about it, you might be able to make it work. You might say, well, there's some things about this house that I really love. There's some things I don't love. Maybe I can fix those up. And so changing the physical environment works sometimes, but changing your attitude almost always works. And so if you notice that you're resisting something, you're saying, well, I really know I should do this, but it's too hard to change. I'm just going to do it the same. Or if you find yourself resenting something, like, why did this happen to me? Or even if you notice that you're complaining. These are all things that affect our attitude. So you might want to have a look at that, notice those things, and, just be aware of them, okay? Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, wrote in one of her books, no one, not even God, can change you or your circumstances. Well, that's interesting. No one, not even God, can change you or your circumstances, so long as you insist upon looking at and thinking of and worrying about yourself and your problems. Well, I've been thinking about all this paperwork, with insurance, all this paperwork and all these doctor's appointments, and no, now we have to buy a new car because the car was written off, and all the paperwork with that, and the property tax, and you know how it goes, over and over and over in the mind. And this is what Myrtle says about all of this. She says, your problems do not exist. Now, I was reading this last week when all this stuff was going on, and I thought, thank you, Myrtle. My problems do not exist, but I can really feel it. It's going on in my mind. Yes, she says the problems don't exist except in your mind. So all the worries and all the upset about everything, she says, withdraw your thoughts away from the things which you have invited in. And it's very hard for me to accept that I have invited all those things and all those worries into my consciousness. She says, withdraw your feelings from the emotions you have built up. And yes, I felt like I could really explode a few times, and I'm responsible for building those up within myself. And she says if we can just let go of these thoughts and these feelings, they will fall flat and dissolve. And so how lucky was I that I read that last week, because it was a nice deep breath to just restart how I was feeling about everything. And so we want to be intentional. And when we have resistance, resentment, complaining, or worry or upset about something, it's not really what we need at that time. In fact, it's self-defeating. It's really working against ourselves. We want to be wholehearted in what we're doing. And, in the words of Jesus, he kind of invites us into this way of thinking. He says, be in the world, but not of it. What a great piece of advice. Be in the world, but not of it. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen master, and he was a peace activist, so he was very grounded in peaceful practices, talks about his early life. And he was a young monk in a monastery in Vietnam. And he says the temple had a really big bell, and the bell used to ring at all the important times. So meal times, the bell would ring, prayer time, meditation time, it would ring. And all of the monks would stop and pause. And in fact, the bell was so loud the whole village outside of the monastery could hear it as well. So he said, well, that was really my first experience of mindfulness, just stopping and he talks about coming back to himself. And so when he left that monastery, he went to France and set up his own monastery. He installed a bell at that monastery, and he kept that practice going. So he said, every time I heard the bell, I'd go back to myself. And all the monks would just listen and feel that they'd come to their true home. And our true home is in the present moment. It reminds me of the song we sang this morning, wherever I am, I'm home. And so, the lesson, I guess, for me is if we don't pause in life, life has a way of making us pause. So we can get carried away by our feelings and our thoughts and our perceptions and all the upset of what's going on. And I read in one of the books, it gives an example of a leaf floating in the ocean. The waves are thrashing it backwards and forwards. And I said, I can relate to that feeling. So we sometimes feel that way. But somehow we need to come back to ourselves. And when we do that, it could be a simple thing, an in and out breath. It's that simple. And that's one of the basic practices of peace. And I like the work of Abraham Hicks, and there's one quote of hers that I always like to remind myself of, and she says, don't get sucked into the vortex of the world. I mean, what a great thing to say. I think it's really useful. Easy to get pulled into all of the noise and the drama that's going on, so let's not get carried away with that. The Benedictine monk, Richard Rohr, speaks about the true self. He says, well, how do you find your true self? And he likens it to a diamond. He says that you are an immortal diamond because it's buried deep within us and it's formed under the intense pressure of our lives. He said you've got to separate it from the debris of life. I love that, the debris of life. So to find your true self, he speaks about Jesus. He says, well, like Jesus, be resurrected. And we were doing that last month. We were going through the Easter process of resurrection. But Richard Rohr says that it's resurrection, it's not resuscitation. So we're looking at transformation. And so that's the way to find our true selves, to find our immortal diamond through our transformation. All of the great teachers speak about this. I mean, there is a thread through all of it, and the Buddha really sees it in a visualization, and he talks about being on a peaceful island, but the island is within. He says that he visualizes a beautiful island with trees and birds and nice clear streams of water and sunshine and fresh air. He says it's just one breath away to feel at home and to be in the here and now. And when we come back to ourselves like this, we can take refuge in that inner island. So, let's affirm some of these things that we've been hearing today. So I'm going to invite you to say after me, I lie down in green pastures. I am an immortal diamond. I come back to myself. I am here, not there. And Mark 6 invites us in. It says, come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest for a while. And so ultimately, there's nowhere to get to. We just need to be fully here. And when we're fully here, we've already arrived. And so it is. Amen.